This video is looking at the poem Snow by Gillian Clarke. Now, if you start to Google Snow by Gillian Clarke, you'll discover that there's more than one of them. So the one we're going to look at is this one. Okay, so this video presupposes that you've read the poem. So if you haven't read the poem before and you're doing this as an unseen, then it may be a good idea just to kind of pause the video now and to make some notes to kind of have your own thoughts about what this poem could mean. Once you've done that, let's look at this as if you were approaching an unseen poem. So the first thing to really consider doing is to look at the title. Okay, think about when you approach a poem, think what expectations is the title of this poem giving me? Because if you then go on with those in mind, you can think, well, is this kind of conforming to my expectations? Or is it kind of challenging them? Is there some ambiguity in the title? Is it maybe subverting, kind of turning my expectations round, playing with them a little bit? Next thing to do is to read through the poem at least once, preferably more than once, trying to get an idea of what it's about, what the story of it is. So you're not jumping in straight away looking for metaphors, similes, rhyme, etc., etc. That's feature spotting at that point. And what you risk doing if you jump straight into that is that you start kind of pulling the poem apart and trying to look at its bits out of context without really thinking about it as a whole. So to start off with, you kind of have a read of the poem, and my impression of this poem when I first read it was, okay, we've got this kind of common experience, if you like, of snow in the first stanza, that the poet here is kind of sharing the experience with you, assuming you've got the same experience from that we. Then you have the kind of instructions about what to do with it in the second stanza. Then looking round and kind of appreciating almost a kind of mysterious element of it. Before in the final stanza, we definitely get a kind of change of focus for our imagery, and we'll come to that in a moment. So what I'm going to do now is to go through and to kind of think out loud a little bit in terms of how I'd look at it. And it may be that you have other ideas as you're going through it, and please do add those, because the kind of joy of coming to a poem is that interpretation, that sharing of your understanding of it with other people. So what I'm going to do is go through, and I'm going to be looking for things that I want to comment on and looking for patterns. So snow as a title, my expectation is snow. That idea of we, okay, so this is a collective experience, okay? We've got an assumption of the fact that we all know what snow is, and it has the same effect on all of us. So pronoun we, pronoun our. And the idea of being brought to your senses is a kind of heightened awareness. Okay, so if you think of how you'd use that phrase in everyday life, I was walking down the street and the loud noise brought me to my senses, implies that you might have been daydreaming a bit, and all of a sudden, you're back in the moment. Got brought to our senses, awake to the black and whiteness of world. So I'm probably going to underline this because of the contrast. There's this kind of strange omission of the in there as well, which maybe makes kind of the world, or world, if you like, I'm going to have to spell magical correctly, seem kind of more magical. And we've got this idea of awake being left by itself on the end of that line. So I know because of the enjambment, it actually reads awake to the black and whiteness of world. But I might also want to comment on the fact that it's kind of left by itself. And that sharp K sound really emphasising that kind of snapping back, okay, effect, that it's made you awake. So the line break there leaves awake on the end of the line, really emphasising, along with that sharp K sound, the quality of kind of coming back to life. We've got snow's sensational. There's a lot of sibilance in there, isn't there? A lot of S sound. To kind of almost give a feeling of luxuriating in it. Okay, luxuriance. And if you look at this idea of snow is sensational, I would take sensational as first of all meaning amazing, first of all meaning kind of great, magnificent, but also here, because we go on to say it tastes and hold almost as something that appeals to those senses that we've just been brought back to. So I think that Clarke here is playing with the word sensational, with that common meaning in terms of amazing and maybe the less common, but almost truer to form, more instinctive meaning of it, of sensational to do with sensations, to do with the senses. It tastes of ice and fire. So we've got, again, that contrast. So we've got two contrasts. I'm going to park that idea just down here to kind of just think contrast. I'll come back to that in the final stanza. And then we have this instruction, hold a handful of cold. And we've got the internal rhyme there driving that instruction. And it's an imperative, okay? So instructions that we're being kind of directed on how best to experience this glorious snow. The next stanza kind of, because this one is end stopped, okay? So we've got that kind of decisive break after the first stanza where we're almost stopping and holding that cold. Then we ball it between your palms. So you've got the handful and now you're making a snowball. Ball it between your palms to throw at the moon. Now, this to me kind of, all of a sudden we're in the middle of the night. Okay, so we've got maybe a slightly more mysterious, slightly more haunting sense. And the idea of throwing things at the moon, we know you can't reach the moon with something you throw from Earth, but it might kind of add this dreamlike quality. Relish its plushy creak. So to relish something is to really enjoy it. Plushy is that kind of rich, kind of smooth, velvety kind of indulgence almost. So plushy creak, I think she's talking about that moment where you have a snowball and if you squeeze it a little bit, it kind of cracks as it goes even tighter, as you compress the snow even more. That really satisfying moment when you're kind of squeezing the snowball and it makes a crunching noise. And again, you've got that kind of sharp K at the end to kind of emphasise that. But we're being given guidance in terms of how to enjoy the snow. And it's relating to really getting out there and appealing to your senses. So the next couple of lines are to do with kind of appreciating how it looks and kind of interacting with it. So shake blossoms from chestnut and beech. And I'm going to take the blossoms here as a metaphor. Okay, so that idea of they are delicate petals that are falling out of the trees, these snowflakes. And I'm maybe going to associate blossoms with all the connotations of delicacy and the transient nature of them, the idea that they don't last for very long. And then our next instruction, gather its laundered linen in your arms. So launder, think of laundry, cleaning, or kind of clean washing, linen, kind of white fabric, kind of things like bed sheets. Okay, so you've got these two images of cleanliness and purity in these two metaphors, because remember, it's not blossoms and it's not laundered linen. We're still talking about that pure white snow. Then we move on to, again, almost picking up that idea of the moon and the moonlight and the magic that imbues, the magic that gives to a poem. We have a twig of witch hazel from the ghost garden burns like myrrh in this room. Okay, so witch hazel is hazel like chestnut and beech is a type of nut. So we're talking about plants. We've got lots of natural images so far. And witch hazel is actually the kind of like not quite an ointment, it's kind of like a solution that we derive from the witch hazel bush. It's definitely got that kind of medical healing element to it. But here we've got a twig of that bush from the ghost garden. Okay, so again, we've now got a more explicitly mysterious description of what the snow has done to outside. These images of it being kind of white and pale and ghostly. But the witch hazel burns like myrrh in this room. Now, myrrh you've probably encountered in the Bible story of Jesus in the manger, 3 wise men bringing gold, frankincense and myrrh. Myrrh itself is a tree resin which, when it's burned, is very fragrant. So the idea that the trees are giving off this kind of magic atmosphere in the snow. Okay, so we've got witch hazel healing, myrrh, that perfume, all of them in the ghost garden. This is a very natural kind of mystical environment. And we get the instruction, listen. Okay, so that caesura here, okay, so that full stop leads us into that instruction, that exclamation, imperative, listen. Ice is whispering. Okay, so personification there, the kind of natural world, the snow, the temperature is giving that kind of, I suppose, communication with us, almost like we're at one with it. And the night darkens, the mercury falls in the glass. So think mercury, look up a picture of mercury if you're not familiar with mercury. Don't ever play with it, it's very toxic. But it's got that kind of quicksilver element of it. It used to be known as quicksilver. And mercury in a glass means a thermometer. So as the mercury in the glass falls, it's getting colder and things are glistening. You've got this lovely kind of alliteration here that's linking those ideas, the glistening glass, and again the kind of ghost garden as well, kind of connected to it from earlier in the stanza. So this kind of, I suppose I'd argue that the g and the glur sounds are giving a sense of wonderment about it all. And mercury falls, night darkens, kind of things are getting more mysterious. Then we come to this final stanza, motorways muffled. Okay, so the muffling sound, almost a little bit of onomatopoeia, it's mimetic, it's mimicking that muffling, so the onomatopoeia in muffled. The motorways are being kind of stopped in silence. And these are the first time really we're getting the man-made world. Okay, so our imagery has shifted from these senses, this contrast, this awareness, all of the natural images, into the man-made world, and it's been stopped. So the motorways are muffled in silence, the lorries are stranded like dead birds. So we've got all of the kind of man-made world has at very least stopped in the kind of other side of things, almost kind of taken on the unnatural. You know, that simile there, the lorries are stranded like dead birds. It's kind of strange. If you're thinking about why has somebody compared something to something else in a simile, you know, don't just ever stop and say, okay, that's a simile, my work here is done. Always make sure that you are looking at exactly the mechanics of it, what's being compared. So why are lorries stranded like dead birds? Well, dead birds, there's something really sad about dead birds beyond the fact that they're dead, okay? And I would always say that dead birds, you know, they're meant to be flying. A dead bird is a bird that is now forever grounded. You know, birds are symbols of freedom and, you know, liberation, whereas dead ones have fallen out of the sky. You know, so there's something that they're not fulfilling their purpose. And to be stranded is to be lost. You might also want to comment, if we're looking at kind of games here, that the word stranded is on the end of a line. So it is stranded. Okay? So we've got lorries stranded like dead birds, airports closed. Again, that idea of, you know, flight not happening, dead birds and airports closed. You know, the aeroplanes aren't flying. Trains trackless. And a track is obviously more than its rails. We know that on one level the snow has kind of gone over the train rails, so they are without tracks. But they're also without purpose, they're out without direction. Basically, this snow appears to have stopped the human world. Okay, anything that's man-made is now struggling to function, in fact can't function, within this new kind of environment. And then the final couplet, we get white paws lope the river on plates of ice in the city's bewildered wilderness. And my reading of this is the paws, you know, are it's kind of synecdoche. And let me see if I can give you that. Don't synecdoche. I'm not entirely sure I've spelt that correctly. Synecdoche. My feeling is there's no H there. Please go and Google it for me. There's nothing like spelling under pressure. Synecdoche is when you have part of something standing for the whole of something. Okay, so I think here Clarke has substituted the pause just to represent all of the animals who are now kind of enjoying the freedom of the city. Because if you are loping, think about, you might have heard it, man loped down the street. It's that way of walking in a really fluid sort of way. And you've got, white paws are very fluidly, very kind of calmly, very peacefully walking the river. Okay, we've got world up here, river down there, lope on the river. The river may have frozen. We've got the animals having kind of absolute open access to everything. They are on plates of ice because the city, the man-made area, has become a bewildered, confused wilderness. But you've also got this lovely play on words here, because if you add be to something, it usually means it's kind of covered in it. Okay, if you say begrimed, it means that somebody's face is covered in grime. So I think you can not only take bewildered on its normal meaning as confused, but also that bewilded almost. It has been wilded and it has turned into a wilderness, and the city, the man-made bit of life, is now confused because of it. So this poem moves from the impact on the individual up here to sharing this kind of joy with us, to a world of mystery, to the impact on humanity, and drawing that contrast. And you remember at the start I said I was picking up these contrasts and wanted to come back down here. We've then got that contrast between what snow means to the natural world and what snow means to the man-made, kind of manufactured world. And maybe a little bit of a reminder from Clarke in terms of which we should be part of. We should be balling the snow, relishing the snow, listening, rather than being on the motorways, being with the lorries, being at the airports and with trains. If you have any kind of other thoughts about the ideas and things there, do add them in, okay? Now, one thing I really try and make myself do when I've looked at a poem is to then go back and explicitly consider the form and structure, just in case I haven't done that on the way through. And I've noticed that obviously we've got 4 quatrains, right? So quatrains are 4-line stanzas. We're going to call them stanzas, never paragraphs in a poem. And I sort of start thinking, okay, have we got rhyme? Have we got a kind of rhythm to it or so? What's the meter? And I'm aware if I'm looking for rhyme, then I've got world and cold as a half rhyme. Okay, I've got palms and arms as a full rhyme. Beach and creek is that going to be a half rhyme? Is that going to be a para rhyme? I've got garden and darken and listen and glistening. Okay. And then wilderness, trackless, ice and stranded. I don't think there's kind of stuff going on there in terms of rhyme. Maybe that's significant because I've kind of got some rhymes and some para rhymes here. When we introduce kind of humanity to it, that kind of blows the rhyme out of the water a little bit. So it might be another idea of something being unnatural. But here, let's look at, we've got garden darkens, listen, glisten. Look at how you can link the words that are rhymed together, because occasionally you might get a really good connection. I think the garden darkens, those kind of connections are linked by the half rhyme there. And the listen, glistening are 2, again, sensual appeals to do with the kind of senses. I think palms and arms here, we've got the kind of rhyme there, kind of envelops, kind of brings together that idea of you start with it in your hands, you end with it in your arms. It's like the rhyme scheme's wrapping that up. And world and cold, that half rhyme, that para rhyme there, maybe a little bit of kind of things being out of kilter, out of normality, because we know down here that everything's stopped. I also kind of think, okay, let's have a look at enjambment. Let's have a look at end stopping. Where are we? Well, most of the lines are end stopped in some way. We've got some punctuation going on, and we've got caesura as well in the middle. So this is kind of giving points for pausing, points for reflection. So I'm going to go and start looking for where I'm made to pause in the middle of lines, between like whispering and night, emphasising that sense of mystery. The kind of pauses with the different instructions, take your time over enjoying it. That exclamation mark, that end stop at the end there, really kind of compelling you. And obviously here we've got this list of the man-made stuff that's stopped, and we are made to pause at the end of kind of each image, and then that kind of full end stop, maybe to reflect on what has happened to our world as a result of this snow. So they're my thoughts on this poem. I'm thinking, just looking at it quickly, I'm not sure there's a regular meter. Please, if you've spotted one and I've got that wrong, please do email me or put it in the comments or so. What to do with this then? It might be that you want to do a general kind of how does Clarke present snow in her poem? And that would be a kind of longer either entrance examination question or GCSE style question, which is trying to get you to structure your ideas. And there you'd be expected to kind of come up with your theory that, Clarke represents snow not only as this, but also as this, and then to develop it in your own kind of structured order. The other thing we can do is to look at maybe some questions which for some inexplicable reason have gone tiny, and I can't seem to make them any bigger. So these are just kind of guided practice, thinking about how to think about this poem. And what you should find, oh look, there we go, was able to make them bigger. What you should find is that all of the points for those questions, or some ideas for those questions, are covered with the comments that we've made so far. So hopefully this has helped, and I hope you've enjoyed the poem. Okay, thank you.